Hi, it's Kristen, and this video is a silly Copic illustration. I have entitled it Happy Cactus. I will show you how I use Copic markers to blend smoothly with a very contrasting marker, as well as sharing my method for creating a color scheme using these color swatches. I have a separate video showing how I create this Copic swatch tool on my channel. There's a link to it in the description. I was looking for inspiration, so I laid out the swatches and picked a few that caught my eye. I find this method works best for Copics because you can see all the colors accurately as they appear on white paper. So I found the blues and browns appealing and lined up my markers. I then began browsing for reference photos of cats because I wanted to draw a cute cat, but instead I found this, and I could not stop laughing, so I decided to draw it. Here's my sketch. Next, I photographed it, made it a little bigger in Photoshop, printed it out, and copied it onto tracing paper with a fine black marker. Next, to transfer the image, I draw heavily on the back of the lines with graphite pencil. Then you tape it on place on the paper you've chosen for your final illustration. Simply transfer the image by gently rubbing a mechanical pencil tip without lead sticking out. I like to transfer my images this way instead of using transfer paper because there are far fewer smudges if you're heavy-handed. This way you can only transfer graphite where there is line work. To start coloring, I use a light blue in the background. I try to fully saturate the paper closest to the cartoon and fade it a bit toward the edges. Next, the pot gets a bit of color with more saturation at the edges and where shadows would naturally occur. I then gave the cactus a base layer of the lightest green. Next, the shadows start to build in intensity with the medium green. And finally, the dark green to add color to the line work. After the darkest green, I saturate the paper with the colorless blender so that the cactus greens would bleed into the fibers and spread out into each other, blending them slightly. This lightens the darkest green and decreases the hard edges and stroke marks. To begin coloring the cat, I took the two lightest colors that I had chosen and filled in the areas I wanted to appear the lightest at the end. I do this to get some ink into the paper and keep it wet before adding the harsher dark color. That way they'll blend in easier. If you start with the darkest colors, blending a gradient is much less even and you'll have marks from the strokes. This process takes practice. I recommend starting with basic shapes like spheres and cubes and repeating until you're comfortable with your blending abilities. Part of the key is to work quickly. I keep the caps off my markers while coloring each section. It can still look silly and confusing when all the lightest areas are dark while the places that should have shadow are still white, but as soon as the dark brown comes into play, you can see it comes together nicely. It's something you have to train your eye to figure out. As I add brown, I go back over with the next lightest color and the colorless blender where I want it to blend to white. It can be tricky holding open markers in one hand. In the past, I have dropped an open marker on my artwork and it was terrible. I had to scrap it and start over. But don't be too discouraged, just be careful. Marker renderings are quick. This one took me about an hour once I started to color. And the line work is pretty simple. Just make sure you have eaten before you start the line work so your hands are steady, because if I don't eat, I shake. Let me know what you thought of this tutorial in the comments below. I really would like to hear some feedback because this is quite silly. I will link my Etsy store, Facebook, and Patreon pages in the description with the material list. Thank you for watching and see you next time.